Okay, I'm going to show you how I full-length resize my cases for accuracy and long case life with a single-stage press and standard full-length sizing dies or a bushing die and my Savage 300 Remington Ultra Magnum. Now, what do I mean by long case life? Well, I expect to get 20 firings out of each piece of brass. And not only does that save me money, it makes my loads more consistent and I spend less time trimming brass. So, where do we begin? We start reloading by firing the loaded round. When we close the bolt, the ejector pushes the case forward against the shoulder. The slope of the shoulders keep the case centered in the chamber. Now notice it also creates a gap between the bolt face and the case. Now as the primer goes off and the propellant expands, the case walls are slammed against the chamber, starting at the thinnest, softest part of the case, the neck. This action continues down the case to the point where the walls are thick enough and hard enough to maintain their own shape. At this point it begins to stretch and the case head is slammed against the bolt face. Now where it stretches, it also thins. Now this thinning of the case walls is where we get separated case heads and catastrophic case failures. So how do we avoid it? Well, each time we size the case and then fire it, the stretching continues. So by reducing this gap between the bolt face and the case head, it will stretch less under firing and the case won't get as long when resizing. Alright, first thing we're going to want to do is insert our full-length sizing die until it contacts our ram, just like you would for any other typical instructions. But we don't want to size it all the way, so we're going to back it off a full turn. I like to use this nifty little tool, the Hornady OAL gauge with a datum line bushing, and we are going to measure our case. My 300 Ultra is 2.471 from a fired case. And write everything down, 2471. It's not necessary to use this, but I find it really convenient. Okay, now we're going to size our case. Now I've sized the case down, and you can see by backing out the die, it's actually grown in length. This one's grown about 4/1000 of an inch. Then our next step is to remove the firing pin from the bolt and see how this case fits inside the chamber. You notice that, we take out the firing pin spring so that we don't have all that tension. The bolt should drop freely until it feels pressure from the case. Now, we've sized it down enough that I could probably close the bolt, but it's going to take a little bit more effort than we want. So I'm going to size it down a little bit more. Okay, I've sized it down a little more, and we're trying to find that sweet spot where our bolt will close almost all the way, where it drops freely, and then we want to force it into the shoulder a little bit, just that last tiny little bit. Not enough that it's going to gall the lugs, but enough so it's being forced, so we want to take that gap away that the ejector spring would be creating. So now I've got that sweet spot in my rifle, and you can see now it measures 2.474. I've actually got a case that's longer than what came out of my rifle when it was fired. But as long as it seats easily without galling those lugs, it's gonna extend my brass life and give me that accuracy I'm searching for. Now that we've found that sweet spot, we're going to run another case up inside the die. Now you're going to want to hand tighten your lock nuts. I like to keep everything hand tight. That way it comes to a stop, you know it's going to be in the exact same spot every time. So tighten it down hand tight and then lock it in place with your brass ring, brass nut there, and that die will be good to go. Double check it again in your rifle with this case, make sure it chambered just like the last one. And then the last thing we're going to want to check here is how much the case has grown in length. So overall case length. And mine is only growing a little more than 1/1000th of an inch per firing. So that means I'll get 8 firings out of it before I have to trim again. Here's a good shot of that sweet spot we're looking for. Remember, with that firing pin out, you get a really good feel for this. So insert that case into the chamber, and then you'll feel that bolt drop freely until you feel a tight spot. We want it to be smoothly, and then just a little more effort to get that last part pushed into the chamber. See right there, there's our free spot, and we want to go just past halfway. So now we've got our headspace set up correctly. We're minimizing stretching, and we're never going to see case head separation with this setup. The next thing we need to do to extend our case life is minimize brass movement in the neck. But it's getting late, I'm ready for bed, and I've got reloading to do. So I will catch you next time.